Good evening, Joe. This is my presentation for my project Repeat, or my Repeat project. This is my project that I've done, and it's called Smart Clocker, and I have my logo made, and my name is obviously Ciaran Maguire, in case I forgot it. Okay, so about my project. My project is a smart clocker as a desktop application designed to run in a working environment to clock employees in and out of work without requiring them to stop and clock in at a physical infrastructure. So to cut down from the gibberish, essentially my project uses facial recognition to detect workers when they come into a place of work and to clock them by name and the time that they came in to the workplace first. And then the camera also works as a clock out system as well, because it's in the same place as the clock in, or same place that workers come in and that they leave, and so it'll also register the last time it saw that person, which is their clock out time. So this idea came from when I was working in a company called CombiLift in Monaghan this summer, and I still am. And we have 700 employees. 500 of them were on the floor working labour jobs, and about 200 of them in the office. Now, the 200 in the office had no real problem with the clocking machine because there were so many clock machines throughout the office that they'd all go and kind of split between each clocking machine, and it wouldn't be a really big deal. And also some different employees coming in at different times. But for the 500 workers on the floor who essentially only had one clocking area, it meant that in the morning there was a line that would go on for quite a bit, and mean that some workers could even be waiting in line for 2 or 3 minutes a day. And obviously that's twice a day, 4 times if you count lunch. And it just became a difficult thing. There'd been plenty of different ways to we try to get around this, but the place we worked in required us to have dual authentication. So essentially, you have to have two ways of clocking in. So you have your thumb or your fingerprint, and then your fob. The reason they didn't just do the fob is because before, years ago, the odd person would come in with a mate's fob to clock them in and be a few minutes early. So I decided I'd work my project on maybe trying to solve this project, or this problem. So there seemed to be a few ways of going about it. Using geolocation and a mobile app was the big way. That's used a lot in the industry, and I think that's probably the most efficient way to go, if I'm being honest. But I decided I wanted to do something a bit cooler than geolocation, so I decided to use facial recognition. So essentially, the camera is fixed at a place of entrance and exit for employees at a workplace, and once it sees them, clocks in with their name and the time, and the last time it sees them, it clocks them out. So it's a simple little kind of idea, but it's a bit more difficult to implement, as you'll see in a minute. So Smart Clocker runs in the command prompt on a Windows, Mac, or Linux PC and uses the user's USB camera to capture 35 images a second and scans through each image looking for pre-trained faces it recognizes. It then registers this face's name and the time at which it saw that face. So it works in the command prompt. Essentially, this isn't a computer I don't think that you'd be using in an office space. This would be a computer set up especially for this purpose, maybe by the IT department. And most of the time it'd be running its software, and only maybe weekly or bi-weekly you'd break out of the software and send over an email with all the clock in data. That's kind of the idea of it. But for the 35 images a second, that's just a fancy kind of way of saying that it's just 35 frames a second, and each frame, or each couple of frames, it will take a frame and analyze what it sees in that frame, and if it recognizes, it'll break it into a 3D array. And then it has also trained itself on employees' faces that are pre-trained into the system, so it will then look for that array within a 3D array, and if it's reasonably close, then it'll register that as a person, and then look for that name in its database, and then obviously just take the current time and register that as a clock in or a clock out, depending on how many times I've seen that person that day. So that's the first feature. Now, this is it actually in working. Now, just for a bit of pretense, Nikolaj Coster-Waldau is an actor from Game of Thrones. I'm not him, and I just stuck his training data into the software because I didn't want my images and my screenshots and my selfies up on GitHub. So that's why that's there, in case there's any wonder there. So it also has email functionality. That's kind of the main purpose of it. So you can see on the right-hand side, it is sent from a CombiLift email because I had already set that up for development at work, so I decided I'd use that too. But essentially just sends on the clock and records there to show when we can see Nicolaj or a person called Justin, who's just me, at a different, using different training data. So it shows the clock and data there. So this project doesn't just gather data, its main goal is to help in the running of a HR department. And so the data can be sent in email format as to help the HR department in paying disputes and ensuring employees are where they say they are at all times. So one of the things I kind of saw with this was that with pay disputes, sometimes you could have to say people would say that they've worked maybe to a certain time every evening of the week, and realistically they clocked out or left either a bit earlier or in some cases a bit later and were deserving more pay or less pay. And this is what this was implemented for, this software. And to ensure employees where they say they are at all times. I recognise that's a bit 1984, kind of Orwellian, but I was just implementing this to show a proof of concept, and I think this kind of shows that an exciting way of we can clock in. If we ever have different cameras, we also know the name of the camera, so we could, for example, call the camera in the canteen camera, and so each clock in would also be able to have the area that I clocked in at. So that's my presentation, and I hope that follows up well on my demonstration video and on my project report. So that's my contacts there. My name is Ciaran Maguire, and my email is, I'm sure you have it, g003@5433@gmit.ie. Thanks very much, Joe, and I hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.